Do you have a fear of flying? We've done a question and answer session here on the Phobic Flyer channel where we hopefully have already answered the questions that are stopping you enjoying your flight and going on holiday. Over the next few weeks, we're going to answer as many questions as possible. So like, subscribe, and come back each week to see the next video instalment.
I started learning to fly in 2013 and it took me 7.5 years to get my PPR licence due to a debilitating fear of flying. I created this channel to show some of my training and what's next for my flying hobby and to prove that it is possible to overcome a phobia. Welcome to the Phobic Flyer YouTube channel.
Dangerous airports, do they really exist?
Yeah.
Courchevel?
No. No and yes. There's no such thing as a dangerous airport per se because it couldn't operate as an airport.
No.
There are certainly airports that have considerable risks.
Yeah.
And if they are not treated and trained for, would be dangerous.
Yeah.
In the airline world, there are various airports that we categorise as being captains only.
Okay.
In Europe, a classic example would be Madeira Funchal.
Yeah.
That is a captains only airport.
Is that in Spain? No.
It's Portugal. It's an island off the coast of Portugal.
Okay.
The authorities require to prove that you have completed sim training.
Oh.
So every airline that operates into there has to follow the Portuguese authorities' version of their rules of how to get in and out.
Right, okay.
Reason being, it's a complex landing on runways on stilts.
Yeah.
With very weird winds because of that.
Wow.
And when you are committed into the approach, it's how do you abort the landing. So we refer to it as a go around. It's where I'm going to make an attempt to land and then I abort the approach, go around and have another go or divert.
Ah.
With the way that you do the arrival into Madeira, that has complexities because it's you making a curved approach against a cliff face, basically.
Ah, okay.
So, yes, it's a dangerous airport if you weren't trained, but the training reduces the risk from that airport.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. And there's a, what's the one in the Alps? Is that Courchevel?
Courchevel's in the Alps.
And you have to have a type rating or something?
You do. You have to go there and actually do the course.
Blimey. Excellent. Okay, thanks for that. The emergency oxygen, where does it come from and how long does it last?
Okay, someone with obviously a little bit of knowledge is asking this question.
Yeah.
The emergency passenger oxygen is chemically generated. It's not done from tanks.
Okay.
So we don't have 100+ tanks that look like diver tanks above your heads in the overhead lockers because you wouldn't get your suitcase in.
No, of course.
So what we have is two chemicals that are mixed when you pull down on the breathing mask.
Yeah.
It will activate the chemical reaction. The byproduct of that is oxygen.
Yeah.
So little known fact that the chemical reaction actually produces warm oxygen. So if you're ever unlikely enough to be in the situation where you need to use the oxygen mask, probably the least of your concerns, but actually the air will be warm. And it will last for approximately 20 minutes.
Oh, okay.
So it's enough time for the flight crew to get the aircraft below 10,000 feet.
Okay.
Where we will depressurise the aircraft, unless it already has depressurised, hence why the oxygen masks have dropped.
Yeah.
At which point you can breathe normally.
Okay.
It's your choice whether you take the mask off before the 20 minutes is up. If once you get a notification from the flight crew that it's now safe to do so, it's your choice. Carry on using it for whatever makes you feel best in that situation.
Brilliant. Thanks, Peter. So the next question's very interesting. I've seen engineers putting silver masking tape on a plane. What is this? Is it safe?
Okay, it's not masking tape. It's called speed tape.
Okay.
It looks just like a fancy reflective tape, silver tape.
Yeah.
It's used for holding bits of aeroplanes together.
Oh, right.
Now, if I said that the average price of a roll of speed tape is in excess of £100.
Is it?
Yes, it's incredibly expensive stuff.
For a similar size to masking tape?
Basically.
Oh, wow.
And it's certified for basically holding aircraft parts together up to certain speeds through certain conditions.
Wow.
So it can only be used on certain parts of the aircraft, and it will be predominantly used as a way of securing a non-critical component, allowing the aircraft to be ferried or to complete so many operational sectors to get it to a maintenance facility where the work will then be completed properly, not using glorified masking tape. It is completely safe.
Yeah.
If we use it, we will probably have a bunch of restrictions implied on us. Okay. So depending on where it is on the aircraft, it may well be that we can't fly over certain speeds or we have to try and avoid certain weather conditions.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Another question here, Peter. So can parts of the plane be broken but still be allowed to fly?
Yes.
Oh.
Going back to the speed tape example,
yeah.
obviously that is a non-standard situation,
Yeah.
but it allows the aircraft to be ferried to a location where proper maintenance work can be completed.
Yeah.
Without trying to get into too much detail, there are 2 manuals produced by the manufacturer. So in my case, flying the 737, they're produced by Boeing. One is called the CDL and one is called the MEL. CDL is stating structural parts of the aircraft that can be missing or in a degraded state. Boeing have certified the aircraft will fly without these, but they'll also then stipulate caveats for what the effect will be on the flight. So it may well be something like a flap fairing. Anyone who's sat at the back of an aircraft looking out at the back of the wing will see long extruding parts out the back. Those fairings, they are literally that, fairings to cover all of the flap mechanisms. Without them, we have increased drag.
Yeah.
So Boeing have said that if one is missing, they will tell me how much extra fuel I will burn per hour, and if that has an implication on how much weight I can lift.
Ooh.
Now, obviously that's a very straightforward example. You can have cumulative parts, multiple parts missing, and you have to combine them all together and come up with what your impact will be for being able to fly the aircraft. The other document is the MEL, and this is the minimum equipment list.
Okay.
This lists items that have redundancy that can be in a degraded state or in fact completely failed.
Wow.
And they will stipulate whether I can or can't take it, how many systems can be affected by it. It would be an example would be say an autopilot computer. With an autopilot computer missing, I can still fly the aircraft, but I wouldn't have any automation, and that may well mean that I wouldn't be allowed to fly in certain airspace. And it would also be very tiring for the crew to have to fly the aircraft continuously the whole time. So you can have parts missing, and you can have degraded systems, but aircraft are amazingly redundant. So even with parts missing or systems failed, it is still very safe to fly, and the manufacturer certifies that it will fly, but they'll stipulate what the restrictions are.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Peter. Oh, this is a good one. Why during landing does it sound like the engines are revving up and down continuously?
It's because pilots can't fly.
Yeah.
This is predominantly a jet aircraft question.
Yeah.
And the reason being that jet aircraft are phenomenal at flying at high altitude, at high speed.
Yeah.
They are pretty hopeless at flying low altitude, low speed, which is required for landing.
Yeah.
So because of this, one, we use a lot of what we call high lift, high drag devices, so flaps on the back of wings. And we want to fly the aircraft as slow as possible, but jet engines take an inordinate amount of time to spool up from idle to full power setting.
Yeah.
Classic figure that gets bandied around, how accurate it is from each aircraft type, I don't know. But if you have an engine at idle and then you firewall it, it can take anywhere between 13 and 17 seconds to reach full power.
What does firewall mean?
Full power.
Okay.
Just put the throttles through the firewall. Just whack it as hard as you can.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
So it can take in the teens. If you need rapid response, it's not going to give it to you.
Right.
So we use the fact the aircraft is very draggy with all the flaps deployed.
Yeah.
And with the gear down, that we can run at a higher power setting where it responds a lot quicker.
Yeah.
Now, we make lots of rapid changes on power
Yeah.
to try and control the speed of the aircraft as it's going through config changes, and obviously it's descending, coming into land, going through different weather conditions. Because of that, it will sound like we're continuously revving the engines up and down. We're simply making throttle changes, and those throttle changes will come through very audibly because the engines are running at quite high power setting at a low speed.
Are you making the throttle changes, or is the auto throttle?
Both.
Both.
So depending on how you're flying the aircraft, you can be flying it through the automation, but we will be doing it towards the latter part of the approach unless it's an automatic landing.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that, Peter. Oh, this is another interesting one, and one that I can remember used to freak me out quite a lot, actually. What is the shudder shaking noise when the wheels retract on some aircraft?
Yes. The 737 is a classic for this, especially if you're sat near the front of the aircraft. Not all the wheels on aircraft have brakes. So after takeoff, the wheels are still spinning because you've been running down the runway in excess of a sort of 120, 130 mile an hour easily.
Yeah.
When you then take off, those wheels are going to continue rotating. When you retract the gear, most aircraft will apply the brakes on the gear that have brakes.
Okay.
Nose gears very rarely have brakes, if ever.
Yeah.
Which means that they are going to come into the belly of the aircraft spinning.
Wow.
So there are pads that they rub against. They have the imaginative name of snubbers, and the wheels will bounce up against them and slow down,
Okay.
which makes the plane shake and gives a very distinctive noise. Anyone sort of, it's like almost like the tyres skidding against the scrubber as it's coming up.
Right, okay. Interesting. Excellent, thank you. Another interesting question. How does the wing remain capable of keeping the aircraft in the air when it dismantles itself for landing?
Okay, firstly, the wing's not dismantling itself as badly as it sounds.
Yeah.
It can look quite traumatic to anyone who isn't familiar with how much of the back of the wing seems to dismantle itself as the flaps actually extend. The wing itself is made up of numerous parts, and when in flight it looks like it's all one unit.
Yeah.
Actually, it's many different parts. There's fuel tanks through the centre, there's lots of structural parts that wrap around those fuel tanks that are the wing.
Yeah.
And then the back and front of the wing are actually parts that bolt on that extend out, that we use as the high lift and high drag devices to give us more lift when we're flying slow.
Okay.
So it may look quite terrifying watching what appears to be the back of the wing completely dismantle.
Yeah.
Especially when you can see through gaps in it.
Yeah. And see the ground.
Yes, exactly. The reason you can see through the gaps, without getting into too technical detail, but it's all about how a wing generates lift.
Yeah.
The flaps are acting as individual wings as well.
Okay.
So you want to get some high energy airflow over the top of them, so they're also producing lift. If it all extended out as one piece, as older style flaps do, it will still give you a lot of lift, but it's not as efficient as the modern flaps, which all act as almost individual wings as well.
Yeah, fair enough.
Thanks for watching. I hope we've answered some of your questions. There are more questions coming next week, so please like, subscribe, and if you have further questions, put them in the comments below.